Vaughan Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Vaughan's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at vaughanresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
The Future of Canada, United versus Separated, is a 5-part series. Listen to all 5 parts on TalkDigitalNetwork.com, HoweStreet.com. This is part 5 of the 5-part series. We have 2 guests on today's show, Peter Downing, the founder of Wexit Canada online at wexitcanada.com, and Frank Vaughan. He was the People's Party of Canada candidate in Ontario for the 2019 federal election. He's online at frankvaughan.ca. Peter, Frank, welcome to the Future of Canada, United versus Separated. Peter, has there been a push to divide the people of Canada, and can people become united again?
Well, Frank mentioned about the power vacuum and the vacuum that the federal government would kind of insert themselves into if there was a separation, which I don't know if he was just referring to a constitutional crisis or a positive vote referendum. I mean, you look at the 1995 and you look at what came out of the sponsorship scandal, and just an opportunity for liberal-friendly marketing firms to receive a bunch of money to not deliver, kind of federal unifying type stuff. I don't know if that's going on again. I think it's probably a little bit more, again, my suspicion and my feel is whether it's in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, the idea of not allowing us to produce our resources under the auspices of environmentalism or sustainability, but selling off the raw materials to foreign buyers. I think it's more that foreign influence that's pushing this narrative and this agenda. And I think that it's as simple as electoral math, is that we don't have the seats in Western Canada, so the Liberals go with the slogan of screw the West, we'll take the rest. I think it's just that banal. I think that they've underestimated the separatist movement and the organization we have, and we're just taking it step by step by step, and that we will be in a position to achieve our goals. 30% of Albertans would vote for separation tomorrow. That's more support than the NDP in this province right now. And if only 60% of people vote, we've got 50%. I mean, the math is simple. If we have 30% of the vote, and only 60% of people vote, we have 50% of the vote right now. It's only going to take a couple of more setbacks or crises or slaps in the face to the West that's going to move us into winning conditions and winning territory.
So I wanted to clarify that when I talk about the push to divide the nation, which I 100% believe there is an orchestrated push to divide Canadians, into that vacuum won't flow federal power. What will come into that vacuum is international power under the United Nations. They're the ones that want the country to fragment. That's their game. Because if they can fragment us, they can rule us. It's divide and conquer. Classic divide and conquer. And Canada, to me, and I've just come to this conclusion recently, because you look around the world and you see hints of it everywhere, and you can make arguments, but I think Canada is the front line. We're the front line in the United Nations effort to flip the United States once and for all. And this is the foothold. This is the beachhead. And if they can fragment Canada, then they can rule it. And that's always been the game plan. Destroy Canadian individual liberty, destroy Canadian identity as a distinct country, and then superimpose over top of that this international idea of how things should run. And with the United States resurging in terms of its national identity, it's that much more important to accelerate the plan of divide and conquer in Canada, which unfortunately I believe separatism feeds into that. And I understand the sentiment, but division just weakens us all. And as far as the polling goes, And if 30% are willing to vote for Wexit, like I said, that would apply the kinds of pressure in one form that might wake up the rest of the country to understand that if we divide ourselves, then the internationalists win. Then international finance wins, and that money flows in and that time flows in, and they take us down. But the PPC, we had 5 different polls nearing the election that showed that anywhere from 20 to 30% of the population in those ridings were willing to vote for us. And we had polls when the PPC was first launched that showed that 20% of Canadians were willing to consider supporting us. And when it came down to it, when the day came to mark the X, we got 1.6. So if those numbers turn into electoral success, good for you. Good for you, because it's short of winning the mandate to initiate Western separatism, which I don't think is a good thing for anybody. I think the pressure that it applies might be enough to wake up the people, because it's not about waking up the feds. Like they want this done. They want the country separated. By forcing the separation issue, you're actually giving Ottawa what they want. And it's not actually Ottawa, it's New York. And I have to constantly correct myself. It's not Ottawa, it's New York. That's where the orders are coming from. And I don't want to see New York win. Because if New York wins, every single person on the face of the earth that lives in a free Western society loses. And we lose forever. I mean, it's not like we can change regimes once this whole thing's instituted. Once it's in place, it stays until a Carrington event solar flare comes along and wipes out the power grid, and we go back to being people who beat on each other for sticks over food. Like it's a total thing until natural disaster strikes and resets the entirety of civilization, and that's not so crazy. If the people listening, the Carrington event was a solar flare in 1876, I believe it was, that if it happened today, would wipe out half the world's power grid. And considering the cities only have about 3 days supply of food, we can all extrapolate what happens. We only need to look at New Orleans, for instance, when the hurricane hit, what happened there within 3 days to see what the prognosis would be. The antidote to that, and that sort of security that we need, is to reawaken a national spirit, because Canada has the ability to sustain itself in virtually every single way. So as to your question, a push to divide Canadians, 100%. That is government policy. They want us divided. That's why they do the virtue signaling with, it's like, both the leaders, whether it was Scheer or Trudeau, it was like, Happy Ukrainian Day, Happy Iranian Day, Happy Pakistani Day, Happy all other national holiday days except for Canada Day. It's official policy. They want us divided.
Can and will the First Nations be a united force in Canada, Peter?
The First Nations are divided just as much as anybody else, if you fit politically. Where we have to, if we want to be successful and continue to connect, it's got to be at the popular level. It's got to be people who want something better for themselves and their families. And if we continue to do what we're doing, we already have great success with that. Continuing to build connections with regular, hardworking people, is that the politicians, whether it be Indigenous or non-Indigenous, lose their power of division, and we have the ability to provide them with better political representation.
We'll have more with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan. Peter, why do you think Prime Minister Trudeau is giving China and Saudi Arabia preferential treatment over Canadian citizens?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not Justin Trudeau, and I can only speculate from the outside based on experience and observation. I think that the Saudi Arabian piece, I definitely see that there's the interest that the government of Quebec has in SNC-Lavalin and the interest that SNC-Lavalin has monetarily, fiscally, economically with countries like Saudi Arabia. And in terms of China, I think that obviously the Americans have a desire to landlock Canadian oil or Alberta Western Canadian oil. That's always had to be sold in bulk or in raw material form to the U.S. to be able to sell it a refined product at international prices. So I think that the reason that Trudeau and previous Canadian politicians beforehand are jumping in bed with the Chinese is for more sale of our natural resources, whether it's bitumen, whether it's softwood lumber, you name canola, you name it. But the thing about the Chinese is there's a lot of strings that get attached with doing business with the Chinese, and number one of them is looking to replace the United States as the number one economic power. So again, where Frank and I differ is I see the conflict, kind of the butting heads, the back and forth between China and America, and I see it as an opportunity, the cracks and the different openings that come up there, kind of like a boxer. I see the opportunity for Western Canada to, an independent and sovereign Western Canada, to be able to offer value within those cracks that open up, and to be able to be a part of a global value chain when it comes to international economy, but in a way that, you know, if you've got those two customers, you know, you don't have one dominate the other. And I get there's definitely a size in terms of magnitude, but some of the external geopolitical issues, like conflict, like Middle Eastern conflict, like things that are going to affect China's access to energy resources, or things that are pushing the Americans further into debt.
So when it comes to China, they're a totalitarian dictatorship. And it's wrong to say that Beijing exerts total control over the provinces, but the corruption of the Communist Party rules everything in China. A lot of their economic power on paper is just that. It's on paper. It's a Ponzi scheme. They print money worse than the Federal Reserve does in the United States. And the way that they maintain control is by denying the basic rights of their people wherever they deem possible. Now, fast forward to China's involvement in Canada. They are interested in one thing, and that's their interests. Their interests align very closely with what the United Nations is trying to do. So the reason I think that Ottawa is constantly selling out to Chinese influence is simply that, first off, our politicians aren't interested in creating or maintaining a strong, united Canada. They're interested in maintaining their own careers, and they're interested in the job placements that they'll get when they leave Parliament. And there's a lot of lucrative doors on a personal level that open up when you kowtow to this globalist philosophy, which is very friendly to China. So one of the differentiations that I would make is that China's not our friend. They're not an ideological partner. They're somebody that we should be very careful about how much access we give them to our markets. The problem is that we're already pretty far gone. It's not just that they dominate the oil industry in Alberta. They also dominate the mining industry in BC. They dominate the ports of Vancouver. If they're very interested only in one outcome, which is resource extraction for Chinese manufacture, and anything they can do to keep the supply of raw materials coming into the country to maintain social cohesion. When Chinese economists look out upon the land, and when Chinese politicians look out upon China, they're not asking, how do we build sustainable economies? Their primary purpose these days is saying, how do we maintain social cohesion for one more day? They track not numbers and not profit. They track how many protests and how many spontaneous demonstrations come up in each of the cantons, which are basically their provinces, or at the county level. I think it's prefectures is what they call them. The only interest they have is how to maintain their Ponzi scheme. when you're dealing with two competing empires, and that's what it is. The Chinese are a rising imperial empire, and the Americans are the current reigning global empire. They are an empire, whether you're pro-America or not. It's hard to deny that the Americans have a global empire. And when you are caught between two empires, the only outcome is dominion by one or the other. Now, if I had to pick, I'd pick America in a heartbeat. I'm actually going back to what we were discussing earlier. I'm not against cooperation with America. That was a bit of a misnomer that was brought up. I've been very clear that we need bilateral agreements with Western powers. We need a new Western bloc that is friendly to democracy and friendly to democratic value systems. We should be increasing our ties with the United States right now. We have the ability to get a fair deal with the United States, but there's certain sacred cows, like the dairy cartel, no pun intended, that we need to put on the offering block. That and there's other departments that we need to actually open up, and it's going to hurt some people, but it's going to be for the overall benefit of Canada actually creating an agreement with the United States that's equitable for both. We have to get closer to the Americans because the alternative is getting closer to the Chinese, it's only going to work out for China. It's not going to work out for us at all. So I'm very concerned. Very, very concerned with the amount of influence that China exerts now. And, unfortunately for what we're discussing, if you take Alberta out and you try to make a fair deal, Alberta doesn't hold the cards. These two imperial powers hold the cards because they're going to have the money that you need to establish yourself, because Alberta doesn't have the money. That $20 trillion, it's in the ground. It's not in your pocket. So you got to borrow from somewhere, or you have to set something up. And if you think Alberta will be allowed to set up a central banking system that's independent of the global system, just ask Gaddafi how that worked out. It's not allowed anymore. So that's why I come back to the only pathway we have to potentially, it's getting to be a longer and longer shot every single day. The only hope we have of maintaining independence for ourselves is together. And I hope we can do it. I hope that the pressure that you're bringing to the table awakens something in Canada that can see us give Alberta what they need. Because, I'm not sitting here in opposition to Alberta. I want to make people to be made clear of that. I want your oil. I want your oil in Eastern Canada. I want your resources. I don't want to take your wealth. I want you to be wealthy. I want to open the taps,
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I said, it's, we agree on so much. So I think from the perspective of we continue to put up the pressure and you continue to say, hey guys,
there's something to look at.
We need to open up the Constitution. I think that could be something that at least we can agree on for sure.
Peter, do you think China's long-term goal is the invasion of Canada one person at a time?
I don't know about that. I think that definitely when it comes to stealing and duplicate. They obviously have a reputation for stealing and duplicating technology. Definitely wanting to be that number one imperial entity to trade places with America, to build their Silk and Belt Road, whatever that. That term that they use there for greater influence over the countries in their region, and definitely for having a window into a foothold or a window into looking into the United States, whether it be through money laundering, the corruption of local politicians, all that kind of stuff. And again, they're aggressive, they're out for their own interests. And they're not necessarily our interests. So, one thing I'm aware is obviously there's huge Chinese populations in cities all across Canada. They take up again a lot of foreign students coming in and foreign money. So, whether it's one tactic or a series of tactics or a strategy, I think the number one and the number two thing is become number one in the world and definitely have that window looking into the United States.
Frank?
I think it's a complex issue because I think that the underlying argument that forms that question is immigration from China. a lot of Chinese immigrants are not friendly to the regime in China. Many are, but many aren't. So I don't think it's Beijing. I don't think Beijing is sending immigrants to Canada with the mission of taking the country over. I think Beijing is going to, their aim is to take over Canada by dollars and by resource, by buying up our land and buying up our resources to gain such a level of influence that they more or less control us economically. And they're well on their way to doing that right now. And there's almost no conversation in Canada about that subject, about Chinese ownership and Chinese influence over our institutions and over our government. I mean, I think Ottawa is I wouldn't say controlled from Beijing, but they certainly exert a large amount of control over what Ottawa is doing and what all political parties are doing. So,
deep history there too.
Sorry, Peter, I missed that.
I'm saying there's a history. I mean, all throughout the 20th century, this idea that we're going to go to China, we're going to convert them with our democratic principles, but the reality is we're going to have this 1+ billion market to sell to, and it's kind of always the oasis or the phantom, when it really is, they're growing, but as you said, they've got their phantom cities. They don't have the infrastructure. It is several different, maybe 50 million people markets that are still big in and of themselves, but I mean, China does not do anything that doesn't benefit China, and Canadian politicians are weak and malleable and corrupt and can be moved in the way that a stronger, more self-assured and determined entity will do.
We'll have more with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing, who founded Wexit, and Frank Vaughan, who ran for the People's Party of Canada in Ontario. He's a Federalist. We're looking at, should Western Canada break apart, or can we unite the country and work in one direction? First of all, Peter, should it be, or is it legal to sue major media companies who knowingly propagandize their audiences?
I think that it's the same sort of question that we talked about with politicians, holding them accountable. You've got professional bodies like lawyers and doctors and other professionals that have a code of ethics. And I think that the media needs to be regulated. They've proven themselves incapable of telling the truth and reporting the facts. And they should definitely be held 100% accountable, whether it's lying through commission or lying through omission. And the individual, you'll hear us, if a journalist comes out against us and writes a smear piece, we go right back at that journalist. We have a 100% policy of making sure that we call them out, and they need to be held publicly accountable and be publicly censored or fined or losing journalism licenses if they're whether it be the individual journalist or the editor who's knowingly publishing false information.
Frank,
I think again, I'd take some public responsibility for this, because we haven't built the alternative. We have to start really embracing alternative media. There's a lot of better options available online available that are not CTV, that are not Global News or these national outlets. And furthermore, and more importantly, I think, is we need to defund the CBC. The public is funding a state broadcaster that has been found in studies to be completely biased towards the Liberal government and towards leftist philosophy. And I did a quick calculation, and it's probably off base by a large percentage, but the quick calculation I did is that it costs the average Canadian taxpayer about $200 a year to maintain the CBC. I don't think that's a good way to spend my money. If the CBC is in demand and if they're so important, they could adopt a PBS model, and the Canadian public would willingly pay for it. One of the ways that we could do this is, in terms of getting the government out of the CBC business, is since we've all, Albertans and Ontarians and everybody in between alike, have been paying for the CBC for so long, the government could issue 37 million shares in the CBC. Every Canadian gets a share. And they list it as a publicly traded company. And then we see what our shares are actually worth on the open market and let the free market sort it out. The bias is there. It's not going away. I think we have to embrace alternatives, and we have to embrace politicians who want to actually get the government out of the propaganda business.
Peter, could the People's Party of Canada or the Wexit movement win elections without a fair and balanced media?
I think we're going to win elections with Wexit. Whether it's been Maxime Bernier or even seems what we're starting to get is, a coordinated attempt to paint us as racist. I think we've been successful in flipping that narrative with Wexit. And establishment conservatism has a lot to lose. Establishment liberalism has a lot to lose. So I think that the media is just a collection of individuals. If you start holding the individuals accountable and calling out the individuals who are slamming, who are smearing us, I think we're tough enough and smart enough that, they are not the insurmountable boogeyman that sometimes they get made out to be.
I was just going to say, when it comes to overcoming massive media bias, whether you like him or not, set that aside for a minute. Trump overcame a media that has been found consistently to be over 90% hostile to win a hotly contested election. And he's on track to win in 2020 again, too, if you look at the way it's going. So, it's not a matter of overcoming, you do have to overcome the bias, but it's just a matter of being strong and having convictions and sticking to those convictions. And that can overcome the most vile media assault that they can possibly level. And I think Canada's time is coming. I think that the time for good ideas is coming. And the media won't be able to stop that.
Peter, is Canada broken, and how can it be fixed, or can it be fixed?
Canada is broken. We are going to continue to push for separation, and if the rest of the country starts to wake up to what they're about to lose and are willing to open up the Constitution to fix what needs to be fixed, again, that needs to be a conversation that's had mostly in Eastern Canada. I think that Western Canadians will give it a chance to give it a shot to see if Confederation can be fixed, if the Constitution can be opened up and we get our grievances dealt with. Anything short of that, Western Canadians have enough, at this point, not just enough self-respect, but enough fear of what's going to come next and what's going to be worse, that they will leave this abusive situation. It is at this point. So I think parties like the PPC have a real role to play in facilitating the conversation in Eastern Canada to say, hey guys, we need to make this fair for everybody, and we need to give you a better democratic product. That this whole voting for your next dictator for the next 4 years isn't good enough. We have to have direct democracy. And I think through the Wexit movement, and if the PPC takes that approach, I think there is a possibility, and again, it's out of our hands in Western Canada. It would just have to be enough fear and common sense and self-interest for the pressure to be put on the politicians and the captains of industry to open up the Constitution to fix it. I think that's the only way that it is broken right now, and that's the only way Canada can be saved in its current political, under its current political boundaries. Western Canadians will leave.
Canada is incredibly dysfunctional, and it clearly is breaking. This conversation, Peter's movement, I shouldn't say Peter's movement, Western separatist movement. Nobody owns a movement.
100%.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to clarify that.
No, you're right. You're right. It's not my movement. We're just supplying the demand.
Yeah. You're an outgrowth of the evidence that Canada is dysfunctional, and it's unfair, and it needs to absolutely be rectified. It's my position, as I've made clear, that if Canada does break, I don't think it's going to work out for any of us. But that being said, I understand the forces underlying the drive to break it. It's complicated. It's sad. I'm seeing something beautiful slip away, and I've been watching it slip away for most of my adult life, and I feel like it's on the verge of completely sliding out of reach. And to be honest, that breaks my heart. So I really hope that we can awaken a sleeping mass of people who seem to think that everything's just going to stay the same, that they're going to wake up tomorrow and the world's going to look exactly the way it does right now. Because if history's taught us everything or anything, it's that things change very fast. There's an old adage. It's a man asks another man, "How did you go bankrupt?" And he says, "First very slowly and then very fast." And if you ask me, how's Canada going to break up? First very slowly, then very fast. So I'm kind of hoping we can wake up before we get to that very fast part.
Frank, what do you think is the solution to all this?
Well, the solution is it's better political choice, but the people have to demand it. They got to start buying it. They got to start buying it with their votes. They got to start supporting those who actually want to fix the country. That I've been saying a lot recently that 97% of the country who voted, and a much higher percentage when you include those who didn't vote, support the status quo. They think everything is fine, and that includes a lot of Albertans who obviously know that nothing is fine, but they vote for their oppressors. I can't blame politicians. I can point the finger at the United Nations promoting their agenda and promoting their plan. I can point that out all day long, but in the end, it's the public that accepts it. And so that's the dynamic that you have to change. The public itself has to take responsibility and has to start fighting back and demanding more. And if we don't do that, we get what we deserve. But I know that myself and Peter as well probably, we will have done what we could, and we'll at least be able to sleep at night, knowing that we didn't partake in the perpetuation of the status quo. It's up to us.
Peter, does it take some kind of a disaster or monstrous event to galvanize people into action, or do they believe right now things are bad enough that they really have to get hustling?
I think in Western Canada, it's only going to take a couple of more setbacks to push people over the edge to put us into winning conditions that we are going to win elections. In fact, win government in Alberta and Saskatchewan. In particular, in Eastern Canada, it seems like there needs to be something like that, or the actual referendum on separation to wake people up. I remember when I was a kid. In Ontario, growing up, I think it was in grade 9 when the referendum, Quebec's last referendum happened, and they had all the students writing, letters to Quebec residents to get them to try to convince them to vote yes, or to vote no, I think, to vote just stay, or whatever it is. So I think that as we start to win seats provincially and federally, I think that will start to wake up Eastern Canada a little bit, and as we get on the verge of power at provincial level, it will take something like that.
Peter, how can people find out more about Wexit Canada?
Visit our website at wexitcanada.com. If you're a resident, if you're a Canadian citizen over the age 18 and a resident of the 4 Western provinces, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, we have just opened up our nominations for members of Parliament. You can write to us at nominations at wexitcanada.com. We will send you a candidate information package and let you know the next steps to compete, to be selected to represent Wexit Canada in the next federal election or by-election.
And Frank, how can people follow what you're doing?
Well, the best way to do it is head over to my website. It's frankvaughan.ca. That's Frank, V-A-U-G-H-A-N. Don't forget the A. .ca. I put out regular work and commentary, and you can support my work there. And I'll be expanding on that in the future. And I really hope that down the road that I can continue to talk about viable political options that will better represent all Canadians, but in particular the needs of Alberta and Saskatchewan, for that matter, that are overlooked and overshadowed by the federal government. In particular, as Peter brought up, the Laurentian elite in Quebec. We need to stop running the country for a particular elite and a particular mindset that, as I've said before, tends to come more from New York, not from Calgary, not from Ottawa, but from New York.
Thank you very much for being on the show, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
And that concludes our 5-part series, The Future of Canada United versus Separated. My guests have been Peter Downing, founder of Wexit Canada, online at wexitcanada.com, and Frank Vaughan. He was a People's Party of Canada candidate in Ontario for the federal election. You can find him online at frankvaughan.ca. If you have any questions for our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.